Welcome back, my friends. Currently, we're on day 335 of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine, and Ukraine might officially have a new holiday. January 25th might go down in history as Tanksgiving Day inside of Ukraine, the day in which Western allies gave Ukraine tanks. And it's a Thanksgiving Day miracle because Germany has U-turned on their position over battle tanks, saying it will send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Germany has announced it is ready to send 14 of its own tanks and to allow others to do so in a U-turn from its previous position. This decision comes after weeks of pressure on Berlin from Western allies. So this would have been nice if Germany had made this announcement last Friday, 5 days ago, at the Ramstein Air Base meeting, but water under the bridge, we're all on the same page, we're there, let's just move on. And we do have a press release and a quote from German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. That's how I know I can believe this. Germany is also reporting that they're sending the Leopard 2A6 variant rather than an older version, so this is good news for Ukraine. There are also other European countries with Leopards in their inventories. They're currently meeting and discussing. I think other countries in the coming days and weeks will make similar announcements of deliveries of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. So here's an article from the Kyiv Independent citing ABC News, and there are about 12 countries ready to give about 100 Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine now that Germany has approved. So this article is from yesterday. 12 countries have agreed to give Ukraine about 100 German-made Leopard 2 tanks after Berlin approves, according to an unnamed high-ranking Ukrainian official. So in our heads, we can kind of just guess who are these 12 countries. It's probably Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, probably Portugal and Spain, and then maybe Canada or Greece as the 12th. But this is fantastic news that in the coming weeks and months, 100 of these very, very capable modern battle tanks will be delivered to Ukraine. And here's the absolutely astonishing news. I didn't think this was going to happen, but in a reversal, the United States is going to send 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. So there probably was a negotiation and a discussion between the American government and the German government, and I think there was pressure from within America on President Biden to give this concession, to give this agreement to also send Abrams tanks. So here's the quote from President Biden. Today, I am announcing that the United States will be sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. It will enhance Ukraine's capacity to defend its territory and achieve its strategic objectives. The Abrams tanks are the most capable tanks in the world. So this was part of another security assistance package being announced just for these tanks, worth $400 million, including 120 millimeter rounds and other ammunition, and then 8 tactical vehicles that need to be accompanying Abrams tanks in order to support them. Now, before anyone gets excited about seeing these on the battlefield against Russia, that might not happen anytime soon. These M1s, these 31 M1s being promised to Ukraine are being ordered from the manufacturers rather than being transferred from existing US stockpiles. So more than likely, the United States is going to make some modifications to take out their top secret materials and maybe upgrades. But this is still going to be one of the best tanks in the world for Ukraine to use. But because it's being ordered, and because this is such a complicated tank, it's going to take months for the logistical and training details to be worked out. And then when will these Abrams tanks make it to the battlefield? In my opinion, probably not until 2024. So the Leopards are going now. These 100 Leopard tanks, we might see them on the battlefield maybe in May or June, but these Abrams probably aren't going to arrive until, best case scenario, early 2024. Now, if the war is still going on at that point, they'll make a huge difference to Ukraine's benefit. But I think the real importance of this decision is showing America's long-term support to Ukraine, saying that yes, we're willing to undertake a project to build the logistical network to support these tanks to Ukraine. That's going to take years to play out. So I think that is the security guarantee that Germany and other European nations were wanting from the United States, saying, are you really going to stick with us? Are you going to be here helping Ukraine defeat Russia potentially for years to come? We don't want that to happen, but that is the guarantee now being given from the United States. So when we talk about and we think about this war, this is going up to the level of World War II, thinking about loss of life and tank battles and the open plains of Europe. I want to share with you the front page of the Daily Mail, in which former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote this op-ed. I don't know much about domestic UK policies or what Boris Johnson's positions were, but when it comes to supporting Ukraine, I'm incredibly impressed with what Boris Johnson has done for Ukraine these last 11 months. And here's the title of his article: "What the hell is the West waiting for?" In an extraordinarily powerful and emotional rallying cry, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson implores our allies to give Ukraine all of the weapons it needs to win now. And I do think for the first couple months of this war, there was this belief that as the war was going terrible for Russia, Putin might take an off-ramp. Putin might choose de-escalation in order to preserve his economy and remain in power in Russia. Russia was already the largest country in the world with vast natural resources. Putin could have lived out the rest of his life being Tsar of Russia, and it would have been fine. But Putin has signaled now, 11 months into this war, it's victory or death. Either he's going to take all of Ukraine, or his own people are going to have to overthrow him. So we only have three options at this point. Either Russia wins this war, fast or slow, or Ukraine wins slowly by continuously giving them just enough to hold the Russians back, but not enough to push the Russians out of Ukraine. That is what victory is defined now. And this option, the way we've been going the last 11 months, this is leading to massive civilian casualties, lots of Ukrainian military deaths, in addition to the deaths of Russian mobilized men, hundreds of thousands of them being called up by Russia to be sent to Ukraine. So the third option, the one we haven't been doing that I think everyone agrees we should do this now, is have Ukraine win this war fast. This will preserve the most buildings, infrastructure, and monetary value. This will save the most amount of lives if Ukraine can push Russia out of their territory as fast as possible. So now that NATO is on the same page of let's help Ukraine win as fast as possible, what else might be coming? What might be announced? Ukraine Situation Report. Kyiv claims that new combat aircraft has already been determined. The Ukrainian Air Force spokesman didn't say what type of aircraft, but did say that money has been set aside for pilot training already. So here's the quote. Our military pilots went to the United States. Funds were allocated for the training of our pilots, the type of aircraft which is likely to be provided to Ukraine, and the corresponding terms of the training have already been determined. So they're not gonna say that it's the F-16, but in my opinion, it's the F-16. They're not getting F-35s or F-22s, and the F-16 just makes the most sense. As far as other European countries that can also donate these planes, in addition to the United States, parts, training, maintenance, the F-16 probably will be announced maybe at next month's meeting at Ramstein. I think they're going to have that meeting every month now. In addition, the Pentagon is boosting artillery production for Ukraine. The Pentagon is racing to boost its production of artillery shells by 500% within the next 2 years, pushing conventional ammunition productions to levels that have not been seen since the Korean War, as it invests billions of dollars to make up for shortfalls caused by the war in Ukraine. So there's a massive artillery shortage worldwide now because of this conflict in Ukraine turning into trench warfare and artillery warfare. Stockpiles around the world have been drawn down. In a way, this is good because the shelf life of these artillery shells are about 30 years. So if we can draw down our old stuff, there's going to be huge demand all around the world to replace that, to buy artillery shells for the next war, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whenever. So I think there's going to be a lot of factories in Europe and North America pumping out these artillery shells at pretty astonishing rates for years to come. Another thing that Western allies can be doing is putting pressure on people still doing business with Russia. The United States confronts China over companies' ties to the Russian war efforts. The Biden administration has confronted China's government with evidence that suggests some Chinese state-owned companies may be providing assistance for Russia's war effort in Ukraine as it tries to ascertain if Beijing is aware of those activities. So I think more companies need to be named and shamed for continuing operations in Russia. I think there was this hope from many companies that the war would end quickly with Russia just kind of giving up and pulling back to their own territory, and then they could sneak by and keep doing business. But as more than likely this war is going to continue for the rest of this year, there's no excuses. There's no justification for companies around the world to continue doing business with Russia, let alone helping the Russians' war effort like some of these Chinese state companies might potentially be doing. So threats of sanctions or actual sanctions might be coming this year. So how is Russia responding to German tanks being delivered to Ukraine? And it's going about as well as you could imagine. Let's watch this 30-second clip together.
Но Берлин будет разрушен, если Германия будет поставлять оружие укронацистам. Это расплата за политические решения. Ну, а давай тогда, что там? Ну, пусть вот товарищ генерал даст команду, и полетите, и давайте разбомбите Дрезден еще раз. Ну, во-первых, Дрезден бомбили давай, не мы. Что давай остановимся? Во-первых, чего останавливаться? Если бы так, мы не остановимся. Мы не остановимся нигде. Так же, как не остановились сейчас немцы, обсуждая поставку танков вслед за тем, что они уже поставили.
So the Russians are saying perhaps we should bomb Dresden again. My World War II history might be a little fuzzy, but I don't think the Russians ever bombed Dresden. I'm pretty sure that was the British and American Air Force. This is a controversial event in history, whether or not the bombing of this city to its full extent was absolutely necessary. But the Russians seem to be taking credit for this when they didn't do it. Here is a quote from one of these clips made by Russian Media Monitor, and this Russian commentator actually said, "The West will lose it exactly the way it lost World War II." I don't remember the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Western Allies losing World War II. So Russian revisionism of history is getting pretty interesting. Here is another clip saying that it was a mistake for Russia to allow West and East Germany to reunite.
Мы сделали главную ошибку, что дали им объединиться, хотя те же западники были против этого. Ошибок было много. Конечно. Вторая была ошибка, что мы вывели наши войска. И не только из Восточной Германии.
Here's the honest truth. The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. It was the Soviets who occupied East Germany. So it's pretty fascinating that Russian state TV, Vladimir Putin, they view themselves, their history, as equal to, the same as Soviet history. They don't distinguish a difference between Russian history, contemporary Russia going back to 1992, and Soviet history going back to 1918, 1919, whatever. And then finally, of course, it wouldn't be a night on Russian state TV without threatening to nuke everyone.
Так, вот нас, я всегда возмущаюсь, надо бабахнуть тактическим ядерным оружием. Нефть откуда поступает? Ответьте, и сначала предпримите меры, чтобы нефть не поступала в эти страны, и перегонки не было. И не поставлял в зону боевых действий. А потом будем это вот громыхать там. Так
извини, чтобы не поставляли, так может бабахнуть, то пойти...
So let's recap the escalation that the West has done the last 11 months. In the beginning, it was whether or not we should supply large amounts of these Javelin, NLAWs, and Stingers. Russia says this is a red line. If you cross this, we're going to nuke you. Then it was modern Western artillery systems like the M777. Russia said if you supply this, this is a red line. If you cross it, we're going to nuke you. Then it was short-range missile systems like the HIMARS launcher. Russia said this is a red line. If you cross this, we're going to nuke you. Then we moved on to modern air defense systems like the Patriot system. Russia says this is intolerable. If you cross this red line, we're going to nuke you. We then recently had modern infantry fighting vehicles like the M2 Bradley. Russia said this is a red line. If you cross it, we're going to nuke you. And then finally, we're on main battle tanks. Leopards are going to Ukraine. Russia said this is a red line. If you cross it, we're going to nuke you. So I think we've seen what the pattern here, and this is the 3 stages of the Russian response. If the West wants to give any aid to Ukraine, if the West wants to deliver sandwiches to Kyiv, Russia is going to threaten to nuke them. Then when the aid is actually delivered, on Russian state TV, they said, this changes nothing. The Russian military is still the most powerful military in the world. Everything is going according to plan. We're right on schedule. We're still going to win this war. And then finally just lie and say that you destroyed it all. Of course, all the M777 howitzers, all the HIMARS, they've all been destroyed 3 times over. Russia has even claimed to have destroyed M2 Bradleys, and there are no Bradleys fighting on the front lines yet. Russia's just absurd. And to anyone watching this video actually concerned about a nuclear response from Russia, please watch this video I made just over a month ago titled, Why Russia Will Not Use Nuclear Weapons in Ukraine. And I'm a former missileer, nuclear and missile operations officer. Unless central core Russia, Moscow and St. Petersburg are being threatened, I don't think the Russians will use nuclear weapons. The negatives far outweigh, well, I don't believe there are actually any benefits, but I'll link this video in a pinned comment down below. And I know this might be hard to believe, but Russian state TV has actually gotten a lot worse in the last 2 months. And part of the reason why is this law that went into effect 2 months ago. You might have already forgotten about it, so I want to remind you. This article is from December 1st. Russia bans public discussions of army strategy, troop morale, and mobilization. This was a 60-point FSB order that went into effect on December 1st, and it lists information that is not classified as a state secret, but which can be used by foreign states, organizations, and citizens against Russia's security. Among the subjects banned from discussion are the structure and size of the Russian armed forces. Other off-limit areas include weapons, troop developments and training, as well as troop morale and crimes committed by the armed forces of Russia. So if you want to go on state TV, social media, or your own personal blog, you can't really talk about the war anymore. You can't talk about what weapons are being used, the size of the military, troop deployments, troop trainings, or troop morale. Try and talk about the war and not cross any of those lines. So on Russian state TV, to comply with this FSB law, they're having to get more abstract about what's actually happening in Ukraine. They can't talk about any specifics anymore. So here's a clip of Soledar that you need to see.
Allahu Akbar. Elohim Hadol. Господь велик. Мы воюем против сатанистов. Это священная война. И мы должны победить.
So this is Soledar, and he is the most watched, most well-known broadcaster on Russian state TV. Watched more than anyone else. And he's a Jewish man screaming Allah Akbar on Russian state TV. This is how insane Russia is, but he can't talk about any specifics of the war. Final couple clips I have for you, and the first one is from Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations as they introduce their latest technological innovation, a horse stretcher for wounded servicemen. This goes about as well as you would imagine it would.
Вы понимаете, официалка недавно сменила сферу деятельности. И теперь она спасает.
If there was a single video to sum up how this war has gone for Russia, I feel like this video accurately summarizes how the war has been going. I've got one more clip for you, but first I just want to draw some contrast to how Russian soldiers on the front lines are faring. And this post concerns Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's daughter, who has been partying in Dubai and posting pictures at pool parties online, receiving criticism as their soldiers are freezing to death in Ukraine. And this video of a Russian soldier freezing in a foxhole somewhere in Ukraine, before you are tempted to feel any sympathy, just remember that hundreds of thousands of Russian men fled the country rather than be mobilized, probably thousands more rather than going to Ukraine, refused or burned their draft notices, and this Russian soldier doesn't have to be sitting here freezing to death. He could easily lay down arms, walk towards the nearest Ukrainian position, and then surrender. So, for whatever reason, he's choosing to freeze to death. But let me share with you something that the Ukrainians now have. Ukraine now has a mobile heated jacuzzi.
Важкого дня, хлопці, отримали таке заохочення від виробника таких чанів. Та й таке, хто правильно воює, той має добре відпочивати. Все, слава Україні, працюємо далі, привезли хлопцям трохи релаксу в тубі. Ми 7 кіло.
That's all for this update video. Glory to the heroes, glory to Ukraine. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support my channel. Comments or questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care, be safe.